The laughter wasn't cruel in the way fists are cruel. It was sharper, thin, surgical, designed to cut without leaving a bruise. It came from the back of the cafeteria, where the suits always gathered. Men and women in pressed collars, silk ties, and manicured nails leaned against tables like they owned the air. They spoke in lowered voices until I walked by. Then the volume rose. "Careful," one of them said loudly, staring straight at my uniform shirt. "Don't spill the coffee on your resume." The others erupted, a neat chorus of mockery. I forced a smile, balancing the tray of cups on one hand. The company's logo was stitched above my chest in faded thread, a reminder that my role was invisible unless someone wanted to laugh at it. Office assistant, runner, errand boy. The title had different versions depending on who spoke it, but the meaning was always the same. Beneath them, the scent of burnt espresso filled my nose as I set their drinks on the table, each cup labeled carefully, as I always did. My hands were steady, though my jaw clenched hard enough to ache. "Thanks, buddy," another one added, dragging out the word buddy the way someone might say loser. "When you're done, maybe you can show us how to file papers real fast. You're like the Usain Bolt of staplers." The table roared again. I lowered my eyes, nodded once, and walked away. Their laughter chased me down the hall, echoing against glass walls and polished floors. But humiliation has a way of burrowing deeper than sound. It rewrites your memory of a place. The cafeteria no longer smelled like coffee or curry to me. It smelled like failure. What they didn't see was what happened after hours. When their laughter ended, my second life began. I stayed in the office long after the lights dimmed, hunched over empty meeting tables with textbooks splayed open beside my notepad. Business law, finance, negotiation strategies, cheap books bought secondhand, filled with underlines and frantic scribbles. By day, I fetched their coffee. By night, I studied the language of power they threw around like currency. I wasn't naive. Respect doesn't arrive because you want it. It arrives when people have no choice but to give it. And respect, in this world, was spelled in capital letters, boss. That word had never been aimed at me, but I could feel it, distant but certain, like thunder behind the mountains. So when they mocked, I listened. When they underestimated, I wrote it down. And when they laughed, I memorized every face at that table. Because the day was coming when those same voices would gather again. Not in a cafeteria, but in a boardroom. And when they opened their mouths, the first word forced past their lips would be the one they thought I'd never earn. Boss. Nights belonged to me. By the time the last elevator chimed and the echo of high heels faded from the marble, I would unroll my battered notebook across the conference table. The glass walls reflected my reflection back at me. A tired man in a faded uniform, sleeves rolled past the elbows, shadows under his eyes. But in that reflection, I began to see someone else too. Someone who belonged on the other side of the table. The books were scavenged treasures, finance manuals with coffee stains, leadership case studies with half the pages marked by strangers before me, a cracked laptop that hummed like it was breathing through a straw. But I devoured it all. Accounting formulas became puzzles I could solve. Corporate jargon transformed into tools. The very memos I once delivered became blueprints for how decisions were really made. And every night, while the building slept, I trained myself to speak the language of power. But books weren't enough. Knowledge without context is a skeleton, it needs muscle. I started to observe. Every meeting I entered, even with a tray of coffee, I listened. I watched how Mr. Daniels, the senior partner, could silence a room by folding his hands and pausing before he spoke. I noticed how the head of finance deflected uncomfortable questions with data, turning suspicion into numbers. Even the jokes at my expense became material. They revealed what people feared, what they envied, what they secretly admired. It was like learning to play chess by being mocked as a pawn. Still, outside those walls, the weight of mockery didn't vanish. My younger sister, Sarah, would meet me at our small apartment, her face pale with exhaustion from nursing school. She worried when she saw the dark circles under my eyes. "You can't keep burning both ends, Adil," she'd say, pressing a mug of tea into my hands. "They don't see you." They won't ever see you. Don't let them use you up. But she was wrong about one thing. They would see me, because I was preparing a day they couldn't laugh through. One evening, while delivering files, I overheard two of the mockers discussing a potential acquisition. Their words were careless, but they lit something inside me. A company struggling with logistics, numbers that didn't add up. I stayed late that night, cross-referencing details, calculating risks. By dawn, I had sketched a restructuring plan on loose sheets of paper. It wasn't perfect, but it was sharp enough to cut through noise. For weeks I refined it in secret, my notebook swelling with formulas, strategies, flowcharts. It wasn't just a plan for a struggling company, it was a plan for me. Proof that I was more than a coffee runner. Proof that I could see what they couldn't. Every page I filled, every formula I solved, every line of strategy one drew. It tightened the coil inside me. Suspense was building, though none of them knew it. They laughed in daylight. I prepared in darkness. And I knew, sooner or later, the two worlds would collide. It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind that carried no omen, no warning. The office buzzed with restrained panic. The kind people hide behind polished smiles and rapid footsteps. The acquisition I had eavesdropped about weeks earlier was collapsing. Numbers didn't align, supply chains snarled, and projections were leaking red ink. By noon, executives shuffled in and out of the glass conference room, their voices tight, their faces pale. I was there, invisible, topping up carafes of coffee. But as I set the last tray down, I noticed the spreadsheet glowing on the projector. The very numbers I had already dissected in my notebook. I knew why they didn't add up. I knew how to fix it. For the first time, my hands shook. Because the thought that rose wasn't small. It wasn't the usual if only they knew. No, this time the thought thundered. I could save this deal. The idea was ridiculous. A janitor suggesting solutions to executives? They'd laugh harder than ever. Maybe fire me for overstepping. Yet the temptation gnawed at me. For weeks I had carried my secret like contraband. Now, in front of me was the exact stage I had prepared for in silence. When the meeting broke, the partners left in a storm of half-finished sentences. One file slipped from the table. I bent to pick it up, and in that single second I made the choice. That night, instead of heading home, I stayed. I gathered the scattered spreadsheets from the copier, cross-referenced them against my notes, and began typing. My hands moved with a speed that surprised me, as if all the nights of practice had been rehearsal for this exact performance. I wrote a proposal, not just theory, but a step-by-step plan to stabilize the acquisition. Leaner supply lines, merged departments, debt restructuring. By dawn, my draft was 20 pages long. I slid it into an anonymous envelope and left it on the managing partner's desk. No name, no signature. If it was trash, they'd never know it came from me. The next morning, the whispers started. Did you see the new proposal? Where did this come from? This changes everything. For the first time, their laughter wasn't about me. It was about hope. But fear came with it. If they traced it back, I could lose everything. The safe anonymity of being the janitor was gone the moment I let those pages go. Every step through the office, every accidental glance from a manager, felt like a spotlight turning my way. Sarah noticed it too. That evening, she studied me over dinner, her voice quiet but steady. You did something, didn't you? I didn't answer, but the silence was enough. She reached across the table, her hand warm over mine. Then don't stop now. And for the first time, instead of only hearing mockery in my head, I heard possibility. The game had shifted. I was no longer just preparing in the dark. I had stepped into the light, and there was no way back. The envelope had detonated something inside the firm. Within days, the anonymous proposal went from whispers in the hallway to the centerpiece of every boardroom discussion. I overheard it spoken of with reverence, even awe, as though the words carried the authority of someone far above their pay grades. It was being polished into a formal plan, and suddenly, the acquisition that had been bleeding out was alive again. But the more the plan succeeded, the smaller my world became. Every time the managing partner's eyes swept the office, I felt his gaze hesitate on me. as though he could sense a thread that wasn't visible yet. When laughter erupted in the break room, I flinched, convinced they had pieced it together. And then came the moment that changed everything. Staff meeting. Everyone. Conference room. I stood at the back, half hidden as Mr. Daniels, the senior partner, adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. His voice cut through the room like glass. "We've all been saved by an act of brilliance," he said, holding up the proposal pages like scripture. "This plan will not only secure the acquisition but reposition us as leaders in the sector. And I want the person behind it to step forward." The silence was suffocating. Chairs creaked. Eyes darted. But no one moved. I gripped the cleaning cart's handle so tightly my knuckles went white. My name burned on my tongue, desperate to be spoken, yet fear smothered it. Daniels's gaze swept the room again. "If the author doesn't come forward, we'll still implement it. But genius without a name is wasted potential." I left the room before anyone could notice the sweat dripping down my collar. That night, Sarah cornered me. "Why didn't you speak?" she demanded. "They asked for you. They asked for someone they respect," I snapped. "Not the man who cleans their floors." Her eyes softened, but her voice didn't waver. "Maybe they need to see that the man who cleans their floors is smarter than the men sitting at the table." I shook my head, torn between terror and hunger. "If I speak, they'll laugh harder than ever." She leaned in close, her words sharp as steel. "And if you don't, you'll never forgive yourself." The war inside me raged for days. Every corridor I walked echoed with whispers of the mysterious proposal. Every office door I passed tempted me to knock, to confess. My notebook, once a private sanctuary, now felt like evidence of a crime. Finally, the invitation arrived. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. The email read, "Executive Strategy Session. Attendance required. Not for janitors. Not for staff. For executives." And my name was listed among them. I stared at the screen, pulse hammering. They knew. Somehow they knew. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Sarah, the apartment quiet around us. "This is it," she whispered. I swallowed hard, feeling both terror and destiny pressing down on me. Tomorrow the mocking would end, or it would destroy me completely. The conference room shimmered with polished wood and glass, the kind of place meant to intimidate. 12 executives sat around the long table, their laptops open, their expressions tight with expectation. I stood just inside the doorway, the uniform still on my shoulders. The name tag on my chest read Adil, Facilities. A reminder of where I belonged, or where they thought I did. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. "We are here because of one document," he said, placing the proposal in the center of the table. "A plan that rescued us from disaster. Today we finalize it, and we acknowledge the mind behind it." The silence stretched, like a wire pulled to breaking. My heart pounded so loud I thought they could hear it. Then a laugh. Sharp, dismissive. One of the junior executives smirked. "Still pretending it's some anonymous genius? Let's be honest. It's probably a consultant fishing for a contract." Laughter rippled around the table. Laughter that sounded achingly familiar. Laughter I had lived under like a shadow. My fists clenched at my sides. I could have stayed quiet, could have let the plan go forward without my name attached. But Sarah's voice echoed in me. "If you don't, you'll never forgive yourself." I stepped forward. "It was me," I said. The words landed like stones in water. The laughter cut off. Every head turned. Daniels frowned. "What did you say?" I forced my voice steady. "I wrote it. Every line. I've studied your spreadsheets, your reports, your strategies. At night, when you all went home, I stayed. I saw the cracks before they broke. And I fixed them." The room erupted. "You? The janitor? This is a joke." Their disbelief crashed over me, but I didn't retreat. I pulled the battered notebook from under my arm and set it on the table. Page after page of calculations, diagrams, restructuring flows, all in my handwriting. "This isn't a joke," I said, my voice cutting through their outrage. "You mock my job, but while you mocked, I learned yours. While you slept, I worked. And while you doubted, I built the plan that will save this company. The room fell silent again. Daniels leaned forward, flipping through the notebook. His expression shifted, skepticism giving way to recognition, then something sharper, respect. Finally, he looked up. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice cool and deliberate. "It appears the man you dismissed as invisible has just proven he sees clearer than all of us." The words struck harder than applause, harder than any victory I had imagined. For the first time, the laughter wasn't directed at me. It was silenced by me. And as I stood there, the janitor's uniform hanging heavy on my shoulders, I realized something had changed. I wasn't the one out of place in this room. They were. The meeting dissolved into fragments. Raised voices, whispered arguments, the sound of chairs scraping against polished wood. But for me, time slowed, every detail etched in sharp relief. Mr. Daniels tapped the table, silencing the chaos. "This company owes its future to a man none of us expected. That changes today. A deal." He paused, letting the syllables settle across the room. "From this moment, you're no longer staff. You're strategy. You'll join us at this table." Gasps, disbelief, a few outright protests. But none of it mattered, because in that moment, I saw their faces differently. The men and women who once sneered at me now couldn't meet my eyes. They looked down at their screens, at their papers, anywhere but me. And for the first time, I didn't shrink. I stood taller. Not because Daniels had given me a seat, but because I had claimed my place long before this moment, in the silence of empty hallways and midnight lights. Later that evening, I walked out of the building not as the man who carried other people's burdens, but as one who carried his own destiny. The night air was cool against my skin. The city hummed around me, indifferent yet alive, and I felt an almost unbearable lightness in my chest. Sarah was waiting outside. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "Well?" I didn't answer with words. I simply lifted the notebook, its pages worn, ink smudged by years of invisible work. She understood. She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, the exhaustion in her face gave way to pride. We walked home side by side, the city lights stretching ahead like an open road. In the days that followed, the shift was not immediate. Some colleagues still doubted, some whispered, but their laughter no longer had power. I had stripped it from them in one moment of truth, and slowly, respect replaced ridicule. Where once they looked past me, now they looked to me. But the real transformation wasn't theirs. It was mine, because I had spent years thinking I was a man trapped by a uniform, defined by a name tag. I thought dignity was something handed down by titles, by others' approval. I was wrong. Dignity was built in the quiet, in every unseen effort, in every late-night page, every silent observation, every refusal to surrender when the world told me I didn't belong. And as I sat at the table in the weeks that followed, still the same man, still carrying the same scars, I realized something profound. They had mocked me because they thought power was about position. But true power is about preparation, about persistence, about stepping forward when your voice shakes but your heart knows it is time. I was no longer invisible, not because they called me boss, but because I had finally called myself worthy. Our 11,